On the wedding night, he told me that he was sick, female contact phobia, a rare variant phobia. As long as a woman's skin, breath, or even body temperature came too close to him, he would get rashes, vomit, and have difficulty breathing. There were tears in his eyes when he said this. He held my hand for only 2 seconds before he suddenly pulled it back, and his arm really turned red. Evelyn, I really love you, but my body, it won't let me get close to you. I believed it. How could I not believe it? If a man cries and tells you that he is sick on his wedding night, you will only feel distressed, that fate is unfair, and that you will spend your whole life trying to cure him. So I started 5 years of healing. I sold the house my grandmother had left me, a small bungalow in Sacramento with a lemon tree in the yard that she had planted. I used that money to buy a medical ultraviolet sterilizer, an air purification system, special allergy-free bedding, and a personal therapist for $3,000 a month. Daniel said the treatments worked, that I gave him hope, and that I was the only woman he was willing to try. Oh, tonight is different. His cell phone was left in the living room, which was rare, and he regarded it as if it were his destiny. The screen lit up for a moment, and a synchronization reminder from the car camera popped up. He recently changed into the black model. I don't know what compelled me to click on it. Maybe I was too tired, maybe the glass of warm water had been there for too long, maybe it was the first time in 5 years that I felt that I should take a look. The timestamp of the video file is 3:17 yesterday afternoon. In the picture, his car was parked in an underground garage. The lights were dim but clear enough. There was a person sitting in the passenger seat, a woman, wearing the beige trench coat that I recognized. Chloe, his cousin. My good sister. Their faces were very close. Chloe is smiling, the kind of smile I've seen people smile at investors at business school cocktail parties, delicate, calculated, and with a certain certainty that they are bound to win. Daniel put his hand on her thigh. No rash. No tremors. No shortness of breath. He even leaned over and kissed her neck. I stared at the screen, my mind going blank. It's not anger, it's not sadness, it's something deeper that makes my whole body sink. My cognition is being torn apart. I have woken up every day for the past 5 years and told myself that his illness was real, his pain was real, and my sacrifice was worth it. I sold my house, gave up my postdoctoral position, and spent all my time caring for one patient. Then I heard him say something. Joel asked him, "Aren't you afraid that she will find out? You have allergies or something?" Daniel laughed, the kind of laughter I had never heard before, relaxed, disdainful, and with a certain sense of condescension. I'm not sick. I'm just allergic to her. I'm not sick. I'm just allergic to her. I put the phone back. Not because I was calm, but because my hands were shaking and I was afraid of breaking the screen and making a sound. I returned to the kitchen, poured the cup of warm water into the sink, and stood in the dark, watching the flow of water disappear. I suddenly remembered many things. The rash on his arm from their wedding night. He told me it was something he had, but then I looked it up and it was more like the rash was caused by rubbing it with some kind of plush fabric. He wore long sleeves every time he had an attack, and I never saw what those rashes looked like. Every time he rejected my approach, he said, "I'm sorry, Evelyn, you know I didn't mean it." And I say, "It's okay, I understand," every time. I understand. I understand it so well. I understand that I can live my life as a nurse, a housekeeper, and a cash machine. I stood in the kitchen and spent about 20 minutes going over every detail of the past 5 years in my head. Every time I go through it, I feel a little more ridiculous. I was born in a small town in Arkansas. My father was an alcoholic and my mother worked as a caregiver in a nursing home. I knew how to take care of people since I was a child. I thought that was my talent, but later I realized that it just made me easier to take advantage of. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just unplugged the power cords from those medical devices one by one. The equipment, the UV sterilizer, the biofeedback therapy device, the heart rate variability monitor, were all bought with money from my grandmother's house. 327,000 knives. My grandmother held my hand on the hospital bed and said, "Evelyn, this house is for you, you have to do whatever you want with it." All I wanted to do was marry a man who didn't love me and burn all the money. I turned them all off. I took apart the filter element of the air purification system and threw it in the trash. Then I went to pack his things. From his row of custom-made shirts in the closet, I took them out one by one, folded them, and put them in cardboard boxes. I didn't tear them into pieces or pour red wine on them. Those are plots only found in TV series. I just stacked them up, neatly, the way I've done everything for the past 5 years, methodically, without fuss. But orderliness itself is a kind of violence. Daniel probably heard the movement, because he shouted from the bedroom, "Evelyn? What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I was putting his passport and a few changes of clothes into the suitcase when he came out. He saw the equipment that was turned off, saw the filter removed, saw his shirt in my hand. The change in his expression is interesting. There was confusion, then a quickly suppressed panic, and finally it turned into a look of hurt, vulnerability that I knew so well. What are you doing?" His voice was trembling. I used to think the noise was from illness. Now I know that sound was because he realized that things might be getting out of control. "Pack your things," I said, my tone calm. "Why?" "Because you don't need this anymore." He was stunned for a moment, then his eyes fell on the shirt in my hand, and then on my face. He is judging. I could see the gears turning in his head. What did I discover? How many were found? How should we respond? Then he did what he's been doing for the past 5 years. He took a step closer, stretched out his hand, and stopped 5 centimeters away from my arm. His fingers trembled slightly, as if he was overcoming great fear to touch me. Then his breathing quickened, his other hand covering his chest, and sweat began to form on his forehead. "Evelyn." His voice was filled with tears. "You don't do this, you know I will." In the past, I would immediately put down what I was holding, help him sit down, get his medicine, and pour him water. This time I stood still and watched his performance. His acting is good, really good. The breathing rate, amount of sweat, and finger trembling are all controlled within just the right range. This isn't the first time he's done this. He might have even rehearsed it. "Daniel," I said, "where were you at 3:17 yesterday afternoon?" His hand stopped. The shortness of breath also stopped. Just for a moment, and then he immediately started acting again. But that momentary pause was enough for me to confirm everything. I don't remember. You know I have treatment in the afternoon. In the underground parking lot," I said, with Chloe. The air froze for about 3 seconds. Then Daniel did something I didn't expect. He dropped the hand covering his chest and stood up straight. The fragile, injured mask that needed to be taken care of gradually peeled off his face, like a layer of skin being peeled off. What was revealed underneath was not anger or shame, but a naked, unabashed indifference. That indifference makes me feel colder than angry. "You saw the in-car video," he said. Not a question. "Yes." He was silent for a while, then nodded, as if confirming a certain fact. He walked to the sofa and sat down, crossing his legs with a relaxed posture, like a CEO adjusting his sitting posture before a board meeting. "Okay," he said, "now that you know, let's talk." I almost laughed. Talk. He cheated on me for 5 years, manipulated me with fake illnesses for 5 years, spent all my money, and then he said, "Let's talk," like he was discussing a contract clause that needed to be adjusted. "There's nothing to talk about." I zipped up the suitcase. "I'll find a lawyer." "Looking for a lawyer?" He raised his eyebrows. "How much does it cost?" I stopped. "How much money do you still have in your account, Evelyn?" "Let me guess, maybe less than 2,000? He leaned on the sofa and tapped the armrest with his fingers. "I am paying for your mother's nursing home expenses, which is 4,000, 3,000 a month. Your investments, the shares in the biotech startup company, are held through the SPV in my name, and are legally tied to me. Do you think you have a choice?" I looked at him. "You have nothing from the beginning," he said, his tone as flat as reading a financial statement. "You think you are taking care of me? No, you are just working for me, using your house, your time, your body, although I have no interest in that. You gave everything to me, Evelyn. Now you want to take it back. What do you want to take?" He didn't even look at me when he said these words. He was looking at his fingers, as if checking whether his nails were trimmed. It suddenly occurred to me that I had never really seen this person in the past 5 years. I've seen his illness, his fragility, his tears, his "I'm sorry." Those are all props. The real Daniel Brooks is the man sitting on the sofa right now with his legs crossed and looking at me like I'm looking at trash. "I'm going to call the police," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "You forged medical records and committed fraud. Call the police?" He finally glanced at me, with a kind of pity in his eyes. "What do you mean by calling the police? That I lied to you? Where is the evidence?" "That video? That's my car, my camera, kissing a woman in my car. That's called cheating, not a crime. If you call the police will tell you, this is a civil dispute, go find a lawyer. Then you go to the lawyer, and the lawyer tells you, pay $5,000 in consulting fees first. Do you have $5,000? He was right. I don't. I stood there, still holding his shirt in my hands. I suddenly felt that the shirt was very hot, as if I was holding a piece of red-hot iron. I threw the shirt into the box, then picked up the box and headed for the door. "Evelyn," he said from behind me, His voice suddenly changed and turned back to the gentle, fragile Daniel who had made me feel bad for 5 years. Are you really going to leave? I didn't look back. Have you ever thought about who will take care of your mother if you leave? My hand stopped on the doorknob. Next month's bill from the nursing home is due the day after tomorrow, he said. You know their policy. If you don't pay after the due date, the care will be stopped immediately. In your mother's situation, even if you stop care for 1 day, something could happen. I closed my eyes. You can hate me, he said, his voice as soft as a child's, but you wouldn't risk your mother's life, right? You've never been that kind of person. He's right. I'm not that kind of person. I haven't been since I was a kid. I took care of my dad even though he beat me. I take care of my mother, even though she sometimes doesn't recognize me. I took care of him even though he lied to me for 5 years. I spent my whole life taking care of others because I didn't know how to stop. I put the box down. Not because I forgive him, but because I don't know where else to go. I slept in the guest room that night. At around 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, I heard footsteps in the corridor, and then the master bedroom door opened and closed. Then came Chloe's voice. She probably came in through the side door. She knew the password. They thought I was asleep. I didn't fall asleep. I was lying on the bed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, and heard sounds coming from the next room. It wasn't words, it was some other sound. Those are the sounds I once thought he would never make because of his disease. Now I know that it's not that he doesn't know how to do it, he just doesn't do it to me. I sat up and put the pillow over my face, not to block my ears, but to stop myself from screaming. I don't know how long I sat in that room. An hour, 2 hours, maybe more. I just remember that when I finally put the pillow down, my face was dry. No tears. It's not because I'm strong, it's because my body doesn't know how to cry for this person anymore. The next morning, Daniel walked out of the bedroom at 8 o'clock as usual. When he saw me making breakfast in the kitchen, he actually smiled, and that smile was so gentle that it made me sick. Good morning, he said. Did you sleep well last night? I gave him a glass of water. Warm water, 43 degrees. He took it and took a sip, and then said, Evelyn, I think we need to have a good talk. What happened yesterday? I know you are sad, but you have to understand that Chloe has a special meaning to me. She is my cousin, we grew up together, and I don't have that, that kind of fear towards her. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you. He was explaining to me. He was actually explaining it to me. Yuza, I cheated on you because you weren't good enough, tone. Daniel, I said, I want a divorce. His smile didn't change. You want a divorce? Then what? What about your mother? What about your shares? Where will you live next? Evelyn, think about it calmly. If you leave me, you will have nothing. I didn't have one. Yeah, he said, you didn't have it. I gave you everything. House, car, health insurance. Where do you think it came from? I got it from selling my house. That's your choice, he shrugged. I'm not forcing you. I looked at him and suddenly felt very tired. It's not physical fatigue, it's a kind of fatigue that seeps from the bones and can't be shaken off no matter what. I didn't want to fight, expose him, make him admit to anything. I just want to disappear. Let's do this, he said, walking up to me and stopping 2 steps away from me, his safe distance. I'll give you a week to figure it out. You can live here and everything will be business as usual. After a week, if you still want a divorce, let's talk about it. But Evelyn. He looked at me, his eyes suddenly became very serious. You have to think clearly about whether you have left my capital. After he left, I sat in the kitchen and dumped my breakfast into the trash can. Then I started checking my account. He's right. I only have $1,872 in my personal account. I still have a limit of more than 3,000 on my credit card, but that is his secondary card and he can freeze it at any time. My investment, a 3% stake in the biotech company, was held through an SPV in his name. My name was not even listed as a shareholder on the legal documents, there was only a beneficial interest agreement. That thing is legally similar to an IOU. My mom's nursing home bill is due next month, $4,300. I sat in front of the computer and listed these numbers one by one in the Excel sheet. Assets are on the left and liabilities are on the right. I wrote and deleted the column for assets, deleted and wrote again, and finally there was only one line left, Grandma's house, sold. The debt column gets longer and longer. My fingers stopped on the keyboard and suddenly I remembered something. 5 years ago, when Daniel first mentioned the SPV to me, he said, Dear, it is more convenient to put your shares in my SPV, and you can save a lot of money on taxes. Anyway, we are husband and wife. What is yours is mine, and what is mine is yours. I thought he was right at the time. I even thought he was very considerate and helped me think of these things that I didn't understand. Now I understand that that is not considerate. That's hunting. While I was still moved, he pulled out my claws one by one. In the afternoon, Chloe came. She walked in wearing that beige windbreaker, carrying a designer bag, and high heels, with the kind of smile I've seen on the faces of girls in business schools, gentle, decent, and making you feel that she is on your side. Evelyn, she sat across from me and put her hand on mine. I heard you discovered something. I said nothing. I want to explain to you, she said. Daniel and I, things between us are not what you think. We have been close since we were children. The reason why he does not have that phobic reaction to me is because we grew up together and his brain separated me from the concept of female. There is a case in psychology for this. When she said these words, her tone was so sincere that it made you want to vomit. I've actually been helping you, she said. You don't know how much Daniel has sacrificed for your marriage. He goes to psychotherapy 3 times a week, and it's painful every time he comes back. He told me that he feels sorry for you and that he is delaying you. That's why he seeks some comfort from me. It's not love, just comfort. She squeezed my hand, her eyes red. Evelyn, do you know how much I admire you? You gave up so much for him. You are a good woman. I just want to help you keep this marriage. What will he do if you leave? His disease. Her tears fell. I watched her cry, and I only had one thought in my mind. Her acting skills were far worse than Daniel's. Daniel's tears came from his eyes, and hers came from her brain. She decided to cry first, and then mobilized her tear ducts. Chloe, I said, where were you at 2 o'clock last night? Her hands stiffened. I'm at home. Are you sure? Her expression changed. The filter of gentleness and sisterly love was broken, and the face underneath was cold and shrewd, much like Daniel. Evelyn, she said, you'd better think about what you're talking about. Your current situation is not suitable for being an enemy of anyone. She stood up and adjusted the collar of her windbreaker. I'm just here to help you, she said, her voice returning to that decent gentleness. If you don't appreciate it, forget it. But remember, what Daniel said is not a threat, but a fact. You have nothing left. After she left, I sat on the sofa for a long time. I think of my grandmother. She was a very silent woman and never spoke much in her life, but I remember every word she said. Before she passed away, she held my hand and said, Evelyn, you are so good at taking care of others. But you have to learn to take care of yourself. I didn't understand it at the time. I thought taking care of others meant taking care of yourself. Now I understand, but it's too late. I spent the next 3 days trying to find a way out. I went to a lawyer. A young girl named Sarah who provides free counseling at the Community Legal Center looks very capable. She read my materials, was silent for a long time, and then said, Evelyn, your situation is very complicated. Complicated is a polite way for lawyers to tell you you're screwed. Your husband's control method is very covert, she said. He does not directly control your property, but, invisible, your assets through legal structures. The SPV is registered in Delaware, and the actual controller is him. Your name cannot be found in any public documents. As for your mother's nursing home expenses, the money was paid from his account and will be legally recognized as a spousal expense rather than his support for you. What should I do? Sarah hesitated. If you want to litigate, you need to pay the legal fees first. About $15,000 to $20,000. And this process may last more than a year. 1 year. My mother couldn't wait a year. My money can't wait a year. Also, Sarah said, have you ever thought of a possibility? What? He might make the first move. I looked into her eyes, and suddenly understood what she was implying. When I got home that night, Daniel was waiting for me in the living room. He saw my expression and smiled. Going to see a lawyer, he said. How's it going? Isn't it interesting? I didn't answer. Evelyn, I told you, you have no choice. He stood up and walked in front of me. This time he came very close, so close that I could smell the cologne on his body. He had no rash, no shortness of breath, no allergic reactions. You never had a choice, he said, lowering his head and pressing his lips to my ear, his voice as soft as a lover's murmur. You don't leave me. You survived through me. You didn't leave me. You survived through me. That sentence was like a needle piercing my eardrum all the way into my brain. Not anger, not fear, but something deeper than either, a sense of powerlessness that had been completely dissolved. I spent 5 years turning myself into his appendage, and now I don't even have the energy to be angry. I walked back to the guest room, closed the door, and sat on the floor. I don't know how long I sat there. It gets dark and it gets light again. Daniel knocked on the door once and asked me if I wanted to have dinner. I didn't answer and he left. About 20 minutes later, I heard Chloe's car drive in. I didn't want to hear it, but the walls were too thin. That night, I made a decision. I want to find evidence. Not evidence of cheating, that's useless, but evidence that he lied to me, controlled me, and systematically preyed on me. If he really has a disease, then his medical records, his diagnosis reports, and his treatment records can all be used as evidence. If he is not sick, then his behavior of forging medical records and defrauding my property is fraud. The next morning, Daniel went out. He said he was going to the company for a meeting, but I knew he was going to see Chloe. He didn't even lock the study door when he left because he thought I had been tamed. I went in. The study room is neat and everything is in order. He had a password for his computer, but I remember one time he asked me to check his email for him and I caught a glimpse of the password he had entered, Chloe's birthday. All the passwords he used were Chloe's birthdays. How ironic. I opened his computer. His mail is clean, abnormally clean. All business transactions and financial documents are in order, and there is nothing related to disease. This means he hid those things somewhere else. I started looking through his folders. Documents, photos, downloads, desktop. Click on every folder to view. In the backup folder, there is a subfolder called Medical, which is full of PDF files. I clicked it. That's his medical record. Not one copy, but dozens of copies. The dates start 5 years ago and go up to last month. Each copy has the doctor's signature, diagnosis code, and treatment plan. It looks very formal and professional. But I'm a biomedical researcher. My daily job is to look at data, read reports, and distinguish authenticity. There is a fatal problem with these medical records. The diagnosis codes do not match. The diagnostic code for female contact phobia variant does not exist at all in the ICD-10, International Classification of Diseases, system. The code they used was F48, which is the code for other specific phobias, but the description behind it was handwritten, and the format was completely different from the formal medical record. More importantly, I checked the signatures of the doctors on these medical records. 3 of them have retired, 2 have moved to other states, and 1 is not a psychiatrist at all, but a dermatologist. These medical records are all fake. I thought I would be angry, but I wasn't. I even wanted to laugh a little. For 5 years, he even forged medical records. How much thought did he put into it? Who did he find to help him do this? Chloe must have been partly involved. She has an MBA and is good at making PPTs and making fake reports. For her, making a few fake medical records is probably as easy as making a business plan. I copied those PDF files to the USB drive. Then I clicked on another folder called Personal. There is a chat history backup file inside. It was exported data from WhatsApp. The conversation was between him and a person I couldn't name, and the profile picture was a car. I opened it. The chat started 3 years ago. Most of it was about funding a project, but there was one conversation that had me nailed to my chair. Daniel, she sold her grandmother's house. Got $327K. I told her it's for the new treatment protocol. She sold her grandmother's house and got $327,000. I told her it was for a new treatment. Opponent, nice. How long do you think you can keep her? Not bad. How long do you think you can keep her? Daniel, as long as she feels guilty. She's the type who needs to be needed. As long as I act sick, she'll stay. It's the perfect control mechanism. As long as she feels guilty. She is the kind of person who needs to be needed. As long as I pretend to be sick, she'll stay. This is the most perfect way to control. Opponent, you're a genius, man. You are such a genius. Daniel, nah, I just know how to pick the right ones. Women like her, they grew up taking care of drunk dads or sick moms. They don't know how to stop. You give them a sick husband, and they'll give you everything. No, I just know how to pick the right people. Women like her, who grew up taking care of an alcoholic father or a sick mother. They don't know how to stop. You give them a sick husband and they will give you everything. I stared at the screen, reading each word. She's the type who needs to be needed. She is the kind of person who needs to be needed. He was right. I am indeed such a person. I've been this way since I was a kid. My dad beat me when he was drunk, and I helped him clean his wounds. My mother doesn't remember who I am and I feed her. I'm used to being needed, used to putting other people's needs before my own. I thought it was love, but to him, it was just a loophole that I could exploit. I also copied that chat record. Then I continued to turn. In another folder called Projects, I found more stuff. A draft legal document titled Petition for Guardianship, based on mental health conditions. The date is last month. I clicked and read. It was a document applying to the court to become my legal guardian. The reason is that the spouse suffers from severe mental illness and is unable to handle personal affairs independently. There is a psychiatric evaluation report in the attachment. The doctor who signed it is a name I have never heard of. The conclusion of the evaluation reads, Evelyn Carter Brooks suffers from severe paranoid personality disorder and persecutory delusions. She is unable to distinguish reality from fantasy and requires long-term monitoring and treatment. My hand holding the mouse is shaking. He doesn't want a divorce. He never thought about divorce. Divorce is too troublesome. We have to divide property, go to court, and may be exposed by me. What he wants is custody. Once the court found me insane, he would become my legal guardian with the power to control all of my property, medical decisions, and even my liberty. By then, I won't even have the qualifications to resist. I copied that document as well. Then I noticed another document in the folder called Psychiatric Hospital Proposal. It was a draft cooperation agreement with a private mental hospital. The content is, Daniel Brooks sent patient Evelyn Carter Brooks to the hospital for an indeterminate period of treatment. The hospital charged a daily fee of $1.200, which was paid by a fund in Daniel's name. The money in this fund belongs to me. He's going to put me in a mental hospital. Use my money. Then he could justifiably take away everything that was left of me, the 3% stake, the decision-making power in my mother's nursing home, and me as a person. I sat in his chair, looking at the documents on the screen, and suddenly felt that this world was absurd. I spent 5 years caring for a man, thinking he was suffering, thinking I was saving him. It turned out that he had been using this time to push me to a mental hospital ward carefully, systematically, and step by step. I copied all the files to the USB flash drive. 3 USB flash drives, 2 in different pockets and 1 hidden under my shoe insole. Then I restored the computer to its original state, closed the study door, and returned to the guest room. That night, Daniel came back in a good mood. He even hummed and made himself a cup of coffee in the kitchen. Evelyn, he knocked on the guest room door, come out to eat. I made some pasta. I didn't go out. It's up to you, he said, but I'm telling you, it's not good for your mental state if you keep yourself locked up in your room. You know, I've always been concerned about your mental health. What is he hinting at? He was paving the way for the psychiatric report. He wants everyone, neighbors, friends, doctors or judges who may come, to form the impression that his wife is mentally unstable, always shuts herself in her room, refuses to communicate, and has delusions of persecution. I opened the door, walked out, and sat at the dining room table. He smiled, served me a plate of pasta, and placed it in front of me. That's right, he said. Look, we can also eat like a normal couple. I looked down at the plate of noodles, and suddenly I felt that it was very similar to the past 5 years. It looked like food, but I didn't know what was in it. I ate it. Not because I was hungry, but because I needed to maintain my strength. I needed him to think I had resigned myself to my fate. Over the next few days, I became much more submissive. I refilled him with warm water, turned on several medical devices, and even pretended to be nervous when he was having an attack. I watched him act, and he watched me watch him act, but neither of us exposed each other. This is a very strange tacit understanding. He knows that I know, but he thinks that I dare not resist. I really don't dare. But I'm not accepting my fate, I'm waiting for an opportunity. That night, Daniel answered a phone call. His voice was very low, but I still heard a few words: evaluation report, next Monday, and court. Next Monday. I have 4 days left. That night, after he fell asleep, I took out my phone, looked through my address book, and found someone. Alexander Reed. This name is known to almost everyone in the pharmaceutical industry. Reed Medical Group, one of the largest private medical investment institutions in the United States, owns more than a dozen hospitals, 3 drug research and development companies, and a biotechnology fund. I met him only once at an industry conference 5 years ago and exchanged business cards. At that time, I was still a promising researcher and had just published a blockbuster paper on the mechanism of allergies. He came up to me and said, "Your research is very interesting. If you need resources, you can contact me." Then Daniel showed up and my research stopped. I hesitated for a long time and finally pressed the dial button. The phone rang 3 times and was connected. "Hello? Mr. Reed, this is Evelyn Carter. We met 5 years ago at the I Know Who You Are." His voice was calm, but I heard a strange certainty. Not polite, not "I remember you," but a feeling of "I've been waiting for your call. I need your help." I said. "I know," he said. "Where are you?" "I sent someone to pick you up." I was stunned for a moment. "How did you dash?" "I knew you would need help 5 years ago," he said, "but I didn't expect you to last this long." I didn't know what he meant, but at that moment, I suddenly felt something was loose. Not hope, but something more primal than hope, a feeling of being seen. "Tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon," he said, "someone will be waiting for you on the corner of your street. A black SUV. How do you know where my home is?" He didn't answer, but just said, "Evelyn, you carried an injured person for 10 kilometers. I will never forget that kind of person." The phone was hung up. I held the phone, my heart beating fast. I don't know Alexander Reed, I've only met him once, but what he said, 5 years ago, there was a car accident. On Highway 1 in California, a bus overturned and I happened to pass by. I helped rescue a few people, including a man whose leg was stuck and bleeding a lot. I dragged him out of the car and carried him for about 10 kilometers. Because there was no cell phone signal and the car was broken down, I could only walk to the nearest gas station to ask for help. The man was later taken to the hospital and I left without leaving his name. I didn't know who he was, and I didn't want to know. But Alexander said, "You carried an injured person for 10 kilometers. That person is him." I don't know what that means, but I know that at that moment, a variable appeared in my life, a variable that Daniel had not calculated. On Saturday afternoon, Daniel went out. He said he was going to meet an investor, but I knew he was going to meet Chloe. They met every Saturday afternoon at a hotel in the city. I had known about this for a long time, but I had thought it was therapy. After he left, I changed my clothes, walked out the door, and walked down the street to the corner. A black Cadillac Escalade was parked on the side of the road with tinted windows. The car door opened and a man sat inside. He is not Alexander. He was a bodyguard, or driver, wearing a dark suit and headphones. He looked at me and said, "Mrs. Brooks?" "Miss Carter." He nodded and motioned for me to get in the car. The car drove for about 20 minutes and stopped in the underground garage of a building. I followed the bodyguard onto the elevator and reached the 32nd floor. When the elevator door opened, I saw a large office with the entire city skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Alexander Reed stood in front of the window, his back to me. When he turned around, I recognized him. Not because of that meeting 5 years ago, but because I met him much longer ago. There is a very visible scar on his right leg, extending from his knee to his ankle. That's what's left from the surgery. In the car accident 5 years ago, his leg was pierced by a metal plate. When I was carrying him, his blood stained all my clothes red. "Evelyn," he said, "thank you for coming. That person you just talked about on the phone, is you?" "Yes." He walked to the sofa and sat down, motioning for me to sit down too. "After the car accident, I stayed in the hospital for 3 months. The doctor said that I almost couldn't save my leg. If someone hadn't taken me to the gas station in time and called an ambulance, I might have died. I searched for you for a long time," he said, "but there was no name or contact information. I only knew that it was a woman with brown hair, about 1.7 meters tall, who carried me on her back for 10 kilometers on the highway. I asked people to check nearby surveillance cameras and gas station records, but found nothing. It wasn't until 2 years ago," he looked at me, "that I saw your paper at an industry conference. Your photos. I recognize you. Then why did you dash? Why didn't I find you?" He leaned back on the sofa and tapped the armrest with his fingers. "Because you are married. I checked on you and you're married to Daniel Brooks. I know what he is." "You know?" "I know him," Alexander said. "Reed Group had a cooperation intention negotiation with him, but I later withdrew. Because there was something wrong with his business model. He had a habit of extending his control by taking control of his partner's personal assets. I wasn't the first to discover this, but I was the first to quit." He paused and looked at me. "But I don't know what he did to you. Until last month, I met Chloe Brooks at an investor party. When she was chatting with someone, she mentioned something, my cousin's wife. If it hadn't been for that mental evaluation report, she would have had a falling out long ago. I had it checked," he said, "and I found the custody petition." I was sitting on the sofa and suddenly felt like crying. It's not because of grievances, it's because, for the first time in the past 5 years, someone is on my side. Not because I am useful to him, not because he is my husband or relative, just because he remembers that I carried him 10 kilometers on my back. "I'm not going to put you in a mental hospital," he said, "but you need to make a decision." "What decision? Are you going to continue to be the victim, or are you going to fight back?" I looked into his eyes. Gray and quiet, like the sea before a storm. "I'm going to fight back," I said. "I'm going to destroy him." He nodded, took out a document bag from the drawer, and placed it in front of me. "It has everything you need," he said, "lawyers, media contacts, and a complete financial audit. Daniel's company will be listed on NASDAQ next Monday, and he will have a big media conference. If you want to reveal everything at that time, I can arrange that. I opened the document bag and found a thick pile of documents inside. At the top is a piece of paper that says, listing bell ringing ceremony time, Monday 10 a.m. location, NASDAQ Market Center, Times Square. You need a USB stick, he said, to put all the evidence in. My people will make sure the equipment at the scene can play it. I looked at him. Why are you helping me? He was silent for a while and then said something very strange. Because you carried me for 10 kilometers, and then you didn't leave a name. There are too few people in this world who have done good things without leaving a name. I looked into his eyes and suddenly understood something. He was not helping me, he was paying off a debt. But it doesn't matter. I don't care what his motives are, I just want a chance. An opportunity for the world to see the truth. On Monday, Times Square. The NASDAQ bell ringing ceremony is one of the most watched events in the U.S. business community. Daniel Brooks was wearing a dark blue custom-made suit and stood on the stage. Behind him was a huge electronic screen with his company's logo scrolling on it. Standing next to him was Chloe, wearing a red dress and smiling brightly like a graduate who had just received a scholarship. I was in the crowd in the audience, wearing a black dress and holding a USB flash drive in my hand. Alexander's people have already made arrangements. The on-site multimedia equipment will be switched to my USB drive when I go on stage. All I had to do was walk up to the stage and insert the USB drive. Daniel began to speak. Today is a special day, not just for me, but for my family as well. My wife, Evelyn, she couldn't come today because she hasn't been in a good mental state lately and is receiving treatment. There was a sympathetic sigh in the audience. She is very strong, Daniel said, his voice trembling slightly, and his acting skills were as good as ever. She has been fighting her own mental illness. I love her very much, but sometimes, loving someone means accepting her imperfections. After he finished speaking, he glanced in a certain direction under the stage. There were several people in suits sitting there. I recognized them as people from the mental hospital. They were holding a document, presumably my admission notice. He is making the final preparations. When the bell ringing ceremony is over, he will have me taken away. In front of everyone, as a loving husband, he sent me to a mental hospital. I couldn't let him finish. I walked out of the crowd and walked up the steps. The security guard stopped me, but Daniel saw it. His expression changed for a moment. The panicked and quickly suppressed expression was exactly the same as last time. But this time, he couldn't hold it down anymore, because I had a microphone in my hand. Alexander's person handed it to me. Hello everyone, I said, I'm Evelyn Carter, Daniel Brooks' wife. The whole place fell silent. Daniel's face turned pale. Chloe's smile froze on her face. My husband just said that I am not in a good mental state and am receiving treatment. What he said is true. He is indeed arranging treatment for me, but not the kind you think. I walked to the multimedia device and inserted the USB flash drive into it. Playback starts on the screen. First video, Daniel and Chloe in the car. The sound is very clear. I'm not sick. I'm just allergic to her. The whole place was in an uproar. Chloe's face turned from white to red, then from red to green. She wanted to rush to the device and unplug the USB flash drive, but was stopped by a security guard who appeared out of nowhere. Second paragraph, screenshot of chat history. As long as I act sick, she'll stay. It's the perfect control mechanism. As long as I pretend to be sick, she'll stay. This is the most perfect way to control. Women like her, they grew up taking care of drunk dads or sick moms. They don't know how to stop. Women like her, who grew up taking care of an alcoholic father or a sick mother. They don't know how to stop. The reporters in the audience started clicking their shutters frantically. The flash made Daniel's face pale. Paragraph 3, screenshot of the custody application document. Evelyn Carter Brooks suffers from severe paranoid personality disorder and persecutory delusions and requires long-term monitoring and treatment. Paragraph 4, the cooperation agreement of the mental hospital. The patient will be sent to this hospital for an indefinite period of treatment at a cost of $1.200 per day. The whole place was completely silent. You back. Later. What happened next is very long, but it can also be very short. Daniel's case lasted 6 months. He was convicted of fraud, forgery, and attempted illegal detention, and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Chloe was sentenced to 3 years as an accomplice. Of course, the listing of that company was a scandal. The stock was halted before trading began, investors withdrew their capital, and the company declared bankruptcy within a month. I got what was mine back. The 3% shares were returned to my name after legal procedures. Although that company is no longer worth much, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that those things are no longer his. Alexander set up a fund in his own name to pay for my mother's medical expenses. He said it was an investment, because I would develop good medicines in the future and he would make money back. I didn't know if what he said was true, but I accepted it. Because I learned to accept help. I went back to the lab. Over the past 5 years, I almost forgot that I was a biomedical researcher. I once studied the mechanism of allergies. Ironically, I married a man with allergies, and then spent 5 years studying how to cure his disease. Now I know that disease doesn't exist, but my research was not in vain. The data about the immune system and allergic reactions were all in my head, and I spent 2 years writing them into papers one after another. In my 3rd year, I developed a new allergy drug molecule that targeted an immune pathway that no one had looked at before. Alexander's fund invested money and established a new company, and I became the chief scientist. In the 5th year, the drug passed phase 2 clinical trials. In the 6th year, it went on the market. That year, I was 34 years old. Alexander proposed to me on my 34th birthday. He didn't get down on one knee or take out a ring. He was just waiting for me at the door of my lab, a cup of coffee in his hand, 43 degrees, he remembered. "Evelyn," he said, "how about you carry me for 10 kilometers and I walk the rest of the way with you?" I looked at the cup of coffee and suddenly smiled. "You even want to copy his plot for proposing? This is not plagiarism," he said. "This is correction. What he gives you is false, and what I give you is true." I took the coffee. The weather was beautiful on our wedding day. In a small church in California, just a few friends and my mom. Her condition has stabilized a lot, and although she still doesn't quite recognize me, she keeps smiling, and she smiles happily. That was the first time in my life that I saw her smiling so happily. A few more years passed. One day, I saw a message on the news. It was short, maybe only 30 seconds of coverage. A homeless man was found dead on the streets of Los Angeles. The deceased was Daniel Brooks, who was once the founder of a biotechnology company. He was imprisoned for fraud and other crimes. After being released from prison, he lived on the streets. According to eyewitnesses, the deceased had an extreme fear of women before his death, and any woman approaching him would cause severe physical discomfort. The cause of death was initially determined to be low temperature exposure, but the forensic report showed that the deceased had high concentrations of stress hormones in his body, which may be related to a long-term state of fear. I turned off the TV. He ended up getting really sick. It's not pretending, it's real. He spent years pretending to be afraid, and finally it became real. He is afraid of women, so afraid that his body has real physiological reactions. When he died, he was holding a notebook in his arms. It was my old notebook that I left in the study. It was filled with my research notes on the mechanism of allergies. He didn't know what was written in that notebook. He just held it like he was holding something he could never understand. I stood in front of the window and looked at the city outside the window. Alexander hugged me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "Nothing," I said. "I'm just thinking about something from the past." He was silent for a while and then said, "Do you regret it?" I thought about it. "What do you regret?" "Regret knowing him. Regret selling your grandma's house. Regret that I spent 5 years taking care of someone who didn't love me back." "No, I don't regret it. Not because those experiences made me stronger, but because regret is a luxury and I don't have time to waste on it. He was just a phase I survived. He was just a phase I got through." Alexander smiled and tightened his arms. "The sky outside the window is very blue, and there are several white sailboats on the bay in the distance." My mom was in the living room watching TV, loud, on a cooking show and muttering a recipe for lemon pie. I closed the window, walked into the kitchen, and started preparing dinner. Salmon, grilled asparagus, and a glass of warm water. 43 degrees. But this time, I poured it for myself.